Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Hi everyone, Sue here from 1A Auto, and today on this 2011 Honda Pilot with a 3.5 liter, we're going to do the timing belt with the water pump. If you need those parts or any of the parts for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. Now to access the timing belt water pump, obviously you go into the hood, and it's located on the passenger side of the engine, and I like to put the hood prop in this lowest little square right there. There's no arrow going to it, but I like to have as much visual and room I can. And you'll notice that there's a engine cover. We're going to take that off. And we also have to drain the coolant. It's a 22 millimeter socket, and I'm going to break the lug nuts free, and then I'll raise it up in the air and take the tire off. I'm going to use a 2-post. At home you can use jack and jack stands if you don't have a lift. We're going to raise it, support it, and drain the coolant. So to drain the coolant, once you raise it up, you can see that they have an access window right here, and this little cutout hole is where the petcock is. So it should hopefully, with any good luck, drain straight out and not hit the shield and go everywhere. So to remove the access panel so I can get to the petcock, I'm going to take a small screwdriver and pull down on these tabs. There's 2 of them. Wow. So they give you these little tabs, so I can go like this and let it hang down if I wanted to. Now I've got a catch pan to catch my coolant, and you can put your hands up through one hand up through that little window and turn the petcock until the coolant comes out. Now I've lowered the vehicle, and I have the catch basin directly below the drain plug. And I'm going to take the radiator cap off because it's going to allow the rest of the coolant to just flow straight out without any vacuum back pressure. Like, gives air to it, so now it'll just flow right out. While the coolant's draining, I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to remove the engine cover. Flathead screwdriver, and there's 2 locations of little plastic tabs right here in the front. We'll turn that, and you can lift up on it and pull it right out. Now the next step I'm going to do is take off the negative battery cable. That's a 10 millimeter socket. I strongly recommend whenever doing timing belts, you disconnect the negative, because you don't want anything when you do an internal engine, any accidents to happen. I like to tuck it down away, make sure that it's not any chance of touching that negative cable post on the battery. I've taken the tires off so that I can lower this, so I can work on it a lot easier, but you do need to take the passenger side front tire off at minimal so that you can access inside the fender well here. So now I'm going to start taking away the shroud, the fender well skirt internal wall. Let's see if we can access that this way. Yep. So I think I have to take this one off in the corner. The other 2, this bolt broke and that clip is spinning. Perfect. There we go. Let's see if I can get this out of here. Well, it looks like I've got a Phillips, another Phillips in here. Or I might just fold it out of the way this way. I'm going to remove the drive belt, and the way to do that is, see this self cut out nut? It's like a nut that's welded. It's part of that cert belt tensioner, and then you have the shock underneath it. So you're going to decompress that shock. So it's a 19 millimeter socket, and then I'm going to pull down on that shock, decompress it. That will take the tension off that drive belt. You can see it slowly. It's a hydraulic shock, so it's just going to go nice and slow until I get to a point where I can slide the belt off. There you go. I can bring that back. Now I can remove the dry belts the rest of the way. We'll get it from the top. Oh, there it is. Removing the cert belt tensioner, there's 2 mounting bolts. There's one on the bottom, right here. That's a 12mm socket. And there's one in the center of the main bolt, and that is a 17mm socket. I'm gonna loosen and remove the lower one first. And that's on the bottom part of that shock, that hydraulic shock. Now you can see how it pivots on that main bolt. Now I'm gonna take a 17mm socket, and I'm gonna remove the middle mounting bolt. There we go. You take the whole assembly out through the bottom here. And there is your cert belt tensioner assembly. To remove the power steering pump, there's 2 mounting bolts. There's one here, and then there's one directly down underneath the pulley. And they're both a 12mm socket. Top one's pretty easy to get to. I'm just gonna break that off. The bottom one, I'm going to use a 1-inch extension with my deep socket. And then you can see it from the top here. You can line it right up, break it free. Now with them both loosened, I'm just going to put the socket on it and take them off by hand. Let's see if I can get in here this way. Now that bolt's ready to come out. Note that the top, the 2 bolts are the same size, so we don't have to mark it. Now I can pull this pump up and over here and out of the way. I'm going to remove the reservoir on the plate here, pushing back on this metal tab. Take a screwdriver, push that tab back. There we go. Now let's see if we can flex this out of the way. I'm going to remove the coolant reservoir overflow tank, and I've got to have access to this cam to take the timing belt off, so I've got to access this cover, and that's the whole point of taking the power steering pump out of the way. I don't like to take hoses off unnecessarily, so I really want to get this up and out of the way just so I can access that front cam. It doesn't seem like this Honda wants to let me. No, let's do that. See if we can put it right back in its place. There we go. So that undoing that gave me flex to get the pump up here, and now I can set that back down there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little clip right here and push on it and pull this harness up off of the mounting bracket, just because I want this to be able to flex right up here so I can take that cover off. So with a 10mm socket, I'm going to remove the top cam covers on the front and the back. So now you can see all the 4 mounting bolts for this top front cam cover. It's a 10mm socket. I've just moved down to 1/4 inch size so I can work smoother. I got a tray I'm going to catch and hold all these bolts in. If you need to on this front one, you might need to loosen up the harness. If you can't get to it, it's just another 10mm socket size nut or bolt. And the last back side. Now we can pull this cover up. It's just got a rubber seal on the back side, so it sticks a little bit. Oh, we got one inside there. One more on the inside. Now we're ready to remove the cover. There you go. You'll see the seal, how it sticks. So it feels like it won't come off of the car, but just gotta force it a little bit once all the bolts are out, and that seal will come undone. And just place it back in place like that. Now what I do is I like to place the bolts that go with the cover. And now I can set that aside. Now I'm going to move to the back cam cover and remove these bolts. I just want to break them all free before I move on to my small 1/4" ratchet. We're also going to take the harness that has that mounting space on the top of it. We're going to take that right out of there before we take the last couple of bolts out. What I'm talking about is this harness right here, how it just pops in there. We want to take that out. Before I do that last bolt, I'm going to take this harness completely out. Alright, so that's out of the cover now, and I'm just going to take the last bolt out. Now without all those bolts out, I can remove the cover. Now with this tool that 1A sells online, it's for Hondas with this hectagon space on the harmonic balancer. And what it does is it holds that harmonic balancer from spinning while you use an air gun to dismount the center bolt. The center bolt is a 19mm. So the bolt won't come out of the harmonic balancer into the crank because this is still the original bolt. It's never been taken out basically. The car has only 100,000 miles on it, and the manufacturer puts thread lock up on that bolt into that crank. Now we've used an air gun, we used the Honda socket to hold the harmonic balancer, and if you look on YouTube or online, there's a lot of conditions. They do make a socket. Liable makes a socket, and so does Ingersoll Rand. I do not have them. The other option is to heat it up. So I'm going to heat it up as if I was working at my house like you guys, and I'm going to use a heat gun so I can limit the flame and hopefully not heat up it. You don't want to heat it too much. You just want it to heat enough to melt that thread lock on the threads. So let's use a heat gun and see if it will work. I'm just going to direct it right at that bolt. I don't want to heat up that seal, so I'm not going to replace the oil seal unless it's leaking. And you can see I'm only at, look at 70 degrees average. I'm going to heat that up. I'd like to get it to at least 100. Let's see where we're at. 102. Let's give it a shot. Well, the heat gun only got it up to 100, and that wouldn't break the bolt free, so I'm going to move on down to MAP gas, something else you can get from a hardware store. $272 in like seconds. Let's see where we're at. And you can see with MAP gas, because the flame is so out of control, it started heating up the timing cover. So you got to pay attention, make sure you direct that in a different angle. I'm going to do it one more time. Okay, so I have got this amazing large pry bar, or wrench, shall I say. It's for a truck. Weighs about 20 pounds, and it's, well, probably what, 3 feet tall. I'm gonna hold the harmonic balancer. Now that it's heated up, gotta get this in here. I have to use the body to hold this. It's a lot. I'm gonna be doing a lot of pressure on this. There's no way I'm gonna be able to hold both of them. There we go. Let's bottom that out on the actual car. And wow. Got it. Okay, we gotta get this piece out of here. Unbelievable. I don't even see any tape on there, or thread locker. I'm gonna take the pulley off now. It's a little warm, so if you had to heat yours up, pay attention to that. I wanna make sure I didn't do any damage with the heat. The rubber still looks in good shape. That's just paint peeling. Now that we have the harmonic balancer out of the way, we're going to remove the lower timing belt cover. There's 6 bolts holding them in, and it's a 10mm socket. The furthest one up on the left side is over here. There's one, and then one on the front, right behind the alternator. And you have 2 in the middle of the cover. And 1 halfway down the front, then 2 on the bottom. There you go. I'm just going to grab it from the bottom here. And walk it right out. So now I'm going to take this little shield off. It's on the bottom crank pulley, and set that aside. Now I can put the crank bolt in, because I have to turn this to line up the timing marks, so the cams line up and the crank lines up. Now I know that when I was taking it apart, I had to reverse and go left a little bit. You try to do that at a minimal, if not ever. Don't ever want to reverse the timing belt and turn it counterclockwise. In this case, I had to keep lining the harmonic balancer up, but now from here on out, you're always going to turn that clockwise. You can do valve damage every time you turn that counterclockwise. It can release the pressure and skip a tooth, and then you'll do valve damage. 19mm socket, and then we're going to see the mark is right here. And you can see that Honda puts an arrow right there, if you can see it from that angle. So I'm going to line this up with that, and then look at my cams on the top and hope those all line up. If not, then I have to turn it an additional 360. How's that look? So I was 360 off on the compression stroke. So we're going to turn this around now. Line that dot right up against that arrow again, and the cams should be lined up properly. this is a must do before you take that belt tensioner off. If you've never done a timing belt before, just take it slow and do it right. You can end up with internal damage, which is not the goal. The goal is to save money and to do it correctly. Okay, right there. And now I'm going to lower it and check my marks on the cam sprocket, and they should be lined up. So this is the back cam located on the firewall. You can see the mark and you can see it lined up. And that's where you want to be on that. And then the front cam has the same marking. As you can see, the painted mark, and it's lined up on the cover. Now we're going to lower the vehicle, and the next step is to take the engine mount off. So you have to take that off, but you have to support the engine over here. The only thing really supporting this engine is an aluminum oil pan. So we're going to put the floor jack right here on the curve of it, not the center. I want it on the curve. That's stronger right there, and I have a piece of wood on the actual jack. Now with the engine supported by the jack with a piece of wood on it, I'm going to loosen up these two mount bolts. And it's a 14mm socket. We're going to need to take this little bolt out too, and it's going to be a 10mm socket. We're going to take that out. You can feel that there's a little bit of pressure on the engine still. And where this is all aluminum, I'd rather lift up the engine than have pressure be on that bolt. What goes through the housing bracket. Now I remove these two bolts. I'm going to take that little small bolt out. Now we're going to remove that aluminum piece that holds the nose of the engine to the engine mount. There's bolts underneath that we have to get to. So I can already see one right here. And there's one on this side I can feel. So now I'm going to lower the engine so that I can get it through the fender well. So now we have 3 mounting bolts, one here, there's one inside this crevice, you can feel it with your finger, and then one up there. They're 14mm sockets, so I'm just going to use a little shallow socket, 3/8 drive. Okay, and the last one is that one in that crevice. I cannot get my ratchet in there and socket. So I'm going to put the socket in first. It sits flush. Now I might be able to get the ratchet in there. The problem is breaking it free and getting it back out. I think I'm going to use a breaker bar. I had to use a breaker bar, 3/8 drive, break it free. I switched it over to 1/4" drive so I can work a little faster, and it's got more room in there. Now on these 3 bolts, I'm definitely going to match them up for length and make sure they go back in the right spot. So this is the top left bolt. See the length difference? So I'm just going to place them down in the design that I took them out. Bottom, top left, and now the top right. Well, they don't make this one easy. So that one that's in that inverted part of that bracket, I have to use a 3/4 deep. Shallow's too shallow, and the deep socket's too deep. So I've got this in there, but now I'm backing the bolt out, and I can see that it feels like it's not much room before it hits the firewall. I don't want to leave myself with a socket stuck in there. And you can't put your fingers on the head of the bolt to turn it. I'm going to move to a shallow socket now. Okay, now it's out. I think we're going to have to take the bolt out with that bracket. There we go. Okay, so this is the bracket. This is the top piece that the two bolts from the top mount in that little plastic bolt for the plastic cover. So we have two of the same bolts on the length on the top. So I'll just put them together like they come out. And as you can see, for some reason, the bottom bolt has thread lock on it. So I'm going to end up cleaning that up and reapplying some. Now, something tells me it goes through the water pump. So that's why it probably has that on there. Additional tightening. So now that we have the timing belt exposed and you can see all the components, you've got your two cams on the top sprockets, you've got your water pump pulley in the center, you have the timing belt tensioner pulley, idler pulley, and then the crank. So this is the timing belt tensioner right here. So the idea is to compress this hydraulic piston, and by doing that, Honda has this beautiful little eyelet right here, and it's a bolt hole that is a 6 by 1.0 thread count. So I'm going to get a long bolt that I know will fit in there, and I'm going to put pressure on this tensioner, and it's going to push that piston down, hydraulic piston down, back into the hydraulic holder, and then I can put a pin in, and then I can safely remove the timing belt. If you just undo these bolts, it's aluminum, you have a chance of stripping it, and then the tension on this belt just snaps down, and one of the cams could actually move. And that's not the goal here. The goal is to do this the best way for the car and for yourself. So it's a 10mm socket, and you just have to turn it slow because you're pushing down on that hydraulic piston. In this case, I don't have a pin, so I'm going to end up using a drill bit just to hold that in so I can undo that and dismount it. Now I'm going to take the belt off because the pressure is off of the belt. You can see I can slide it off, and you can see the bolt is bending due to the grade of that bolt. It's just a little cheesy 6mm bolt. So I'm going to take the belt off so then I can unbolt the tensioner and there will be no snapping of the belt. So now the belt is off that tensioner. I'm going to loosen up the mounting bolts here, which are 10mm sockets. I'm going to take some of the pressure off that tension. Hope that this bolt will come out backwards and not break. Yeah, that's what I was trying to avoid. But at least I got all the tension off of it. I got a good portion of it. Now with the tensioner out, I'm going to take the timing belt off, bringing it around slowly, making sure I don't put any tension on it, those cams. I don't want them to turn on me. Now I'm going to take this plate off. It's just a little 10mm socket. The stud will stay on the block, and you'll just remove the two nuts. And you can take that guide plate right out of the way. It helps put pressure on the belt. It also helps with installation. So you can see that the beautiful cheap metal that we use for this bolt, it bent. It couldn't take the pressure. So basically I'm going to take out my whizzer and I'm just going to cut it flush here so I can back it out the rest of the way without any damage to the ear on that block. Now I'm going to take the timing belt tensioner pulley part off. It's a 14mm socket. Now I can get to all the water pump bolts clearer and see what I'm doing a little bit easier. That's right where it bends, so I'm gonna bring it back through, cut it more where it's straight so it will come right out. Yeah, that should be a lot easier. Well, that was a lot of fun. It's a great idea, great concept. I strongly recommend a stronger grade metal for a bolt if you're going to do it. Preferably steel and not probably white metal. So now I'm going to remove this idler pulley. It's a 10mm socket. Now we're at the point where the belt's off, the tension is off, the tensioner pulley, and the idler pulley is off. We have a great clear view of everything and it's dry. So this is where I would say examine your seals. So you can look at your cam seals, make sure they're dry, because if not, this is the time you need to change them. And the crank seal, especially where if you used heat like I did to loosen this up, you want to check that out. Now I don't want to take that pulley all the way off because then that involves me snapping that bolt free and I'm going to turn that. It wouldn't be damaging, but it wouldn't, you know, I just don't need to do it. So I can actually see the seal with the flashlight. I can bring it in here and see that it is beautifully dry. It doesn't have any burn marks. It doesn't look like I manipulated it at all with the heat that I used. We used it more direct on the bolt and internal on the threads. So I'm not going to change any seals, but what I am going to change is the water pump. And you might say, well, it's not leaking, I'm not going to change my water pump. Well, the timing belt puts pressure on the pulley of the pump where it drives it. That has constant pressure on it from that timing belt. If the bearings in there are starting to wear, which you're not going to know if you don't have any play, but there could be a flat spot on one, and you're not going to be aware of it, that water pump pulley lets go when you put the new belt on in a month, 2 months, a week. Doesn't matter. You could end up with engine damage or doing the job all over again. So that's why they sell it in a kit. 1A Auto sells the kit with the timing belt, water pump, idler pulley, tensioner, and timing belt tensioner. So I would recommend getting the kit and doing the job correctly. So now I'm going to remove the water pump, and there is 5 mounting bolts on it. Once the tensioner and idler is out of the way, it's a 10mm socket. I'm just going to loosen them all up, snap them all free, and I'll probably be able to do it with my fingers after, by my hands, the strength of my hands. It's just because the ratchet and everything's so big in here, there's no need. You can break them free. So make sure you have a catch pan. Even though we drained the radiator, there's always going to be some residual, that's a word, coming out. And once again, I'm going to examine each bolt for the length and make sure that there's not one that is in a special order or a special place. So I know those 2 are the same length. And then I will examine the back ones when I take those out. Now I'm standing here and I'm taking these bolts out slowly and I'm examining the water pump while I'm looking at it. And I can actually see it's really small, but I can see residual right here of coolant. It's not enough that you would maybe notice it, but the trained eye, I can see residual, so that tells me that inner seal is wearing out. So it's just seeping out. Some manufacturers, Honda being one, Toyota being another, and some Chevys actually, they tell you that the water pump is allowed to have residual. Either way, this water pump's being changed. So pay attention for that too, to convince yourself if you want to come up with that one. Cool, all bolts are the same, no worries there. So now I'm just going to take a little screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and I'm going to pry this water pump away from the block. So there's a guide pin on the bottom here and up in that upper corner there. So I'm just going to work my way around and try to, without damaging the surface, just wiggle it. There we go. And pull that water pump right out. Here we have the new kit from 1A Auto for our 3.5 Honda engine. 2011, and here is the original parts that came out. It's the original timing belt, water pump, tensioner, idler, and tensioner pulley. As you can see, the water pump is set up exactly the same. It's got the mounting for the tensioner. It's got the drain. If you spin it around, it comes with the two guided pins where it mounts into the block. Comes with a new O-ring gasket. The new hydraulic tensioner comes with a pin, so you pull it out once you've mounted it. You do have to transfer over the bolts. That's very normal. New idler, new bearings, steel bearings. You'll have to transfer over the bolt. As you can see, the staging is exactly the same. And then the tensioner idler pulley. Same size, same sealed bearing, same mount. You just transfer over the bushing, pushes out, goes in the back, and then the bearing. They also supply you with a shim. There's a technical service bulletin on the idler pulley, and you have to see if your VIN number is in guide to mount that. And it comes with a sticker you can place on your engine for your intervals of timing belt. If you need this part or any other part for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. So now I'm in the process of cleaning the threads on the timing belt idler bolt. You can use a hand wire brush or a wire wheel. That's what you have. Before I install the water pump, I'm going to extract any coolant I can out of the side jacket here. I'm going to use the fluid extractor that we sell here at 1A Auto. The only reason I'm doing this is because I don't want coolant seeping out between the new gasket and the surface. I would like to make sure that it is as drained as much as possible, because it is a rubber gasket, it's not paper. It's just the precautions that I like to take. So now I know no coolant's going to be hitting the new surface. I'm ready to clean up that surface. I'm going to take a little sandpaper, very fine grit. I use my sanding block. I just want to make sure I've got a nice clean, smooth surface that rubber gasket's going to hit. I'll just wipe that all right down. Now we can take the new water pump that has the 2 guide pins on it. One there and there. Make sure the gasket's seated flush down in the groove. There's a couple little dimples that will hold that rubber gasket in. Now we can replace the 5 bolts. There was no distinct different sizes. They're all the same. The torque specs for this water pump is 8.9 foot-pounds. That's not a lot, so it's because it's just a rubber O-ring. You just need to mount it with a nice flush, equal torques all the way around. Okay, I'm going to take a 10mm on a 1/4 inch ratchet, and I'm just going to snug them. And I'm going to go from the center out. Get my torque wrench, I'm going to set it to 8.9. I'm going to go in the same sequence. I'm going to go from the closest one in and work my way around. Last one. I'll give it a quick check. Now that we've cleaned up the bolt of the old thread lock, I'm going to apply a new layer of thread lock, and then I'm going to install this tensioner. There's a guide pulley. I like to mesh it into the threads, make sure I get it all in there. And this one is located right here. It's a 14mm socket. It's a fairly good sized bolt, so it has a torque specs of 33 foot-pounds. When using thread lock on the threads, you want to apply it and install it and torque it before, you can't let it set. Okay, so I'm set for 33 foot-pounds. There we go. So here we have the new timing belt tensioner idler pulley. You got to use the old bolt and make sure you grab this bushing out of the old tensioner, and it gets installed through the back, and then the bolt goes on. So we can line this up right now. There's a cutout on the water pump that sits right in, like that. Then you can put the bolt in. So here's the cutout. Center the bolt and start it by hand. And that is supposed to free flow pivot. That's what you want. The torque on that bolt is 18 foot-pounds, and that is a 14mm socket. And now I'm going to install the hydraulic tensioner. You have to reuse the old bolts, so we made sure you pull them out of the old tensioner, the hydraulic tensioner. So I'm going to guide that up and line those 2 bolt holes up and start them by hand. They're usually just small 6mm size bolts. The torque spec is 8.9, same as your water pump. It's a 10mm socket. We'll just put that right on. Okay, now I'm going to clean it. I take a little parts cleaner. Now that all the bolt holes and threads are clear from, I don't want any debris going in them. And this way I can clean up the actual antifreeze that sat on the lower crank here. I don't want that hitting the belt. I want that clean. And if I think there's any antifreeze in there, I'm going to clean that out too. This will air dry. It should be all set. Antifreeze has got like an oil base, petroleum base to it. You don't want your timing belt getting coated with that. Before I install the belt, the new timing belt, I'm just confirming that my marks are good on both cams. Nothing's moved because I'm down below here. And this is the angle that I'm going to be at to install the timing belt. All the lines are still lined up in the crank. So now we're going to go ahead and install the belt. Now Honda has this marked as how to install it first. So we're going to go counterclockwise, starting at the base crank. So this pulley, the crank pulley, and then around the idler pulley, then up through the right side cam, down below the water pump, over the left side cam, down around the timing tensioner pulley, and then we can release the pin in that sequence. So once I get it on the bottom here, I'm going to grab my timing belt guide that belongs on the bottom crank. And that's that tin shield. I'm going to put that on. That's going to stop that from falling off. Those are the 2 nuts that go right on there with a 10mm socket. I'm just going to hand tighten them right now. I can tighten them up later. It's just reassuring me that this belt, if I let go or if it slips, it shouldn't come off the bottom. So you want to keep tension on this. You want it to be taut as you bring it up and around. You don't want this. See how sloppy this is? That's not what you want. You want that to be a lot tighter than that. There we go. So I've got the belt on the back pulley now. What I did was I lowered the vehicle and came back up on the top, and see this guide right here? You have to, from down below, I could not manage to put the belt underneath that. So you might have to work from the bottom and the top at the same time. I fit the belt through that guide and it fell into the grooves. Then I wrapped it around. There's another one of these on the bottom. So I had to push the belt in under it, and then it lines right up, bring it right around and slide it right over the tensioner pulley. So what we want to feel right now is we want to feel tautness here and here, which we do. All on the front side of that timing belt, you want it to be taut. And we should have slack down on the bottom, right here. That's where we want it. Let's, one last time, double check our marks, make sure all the marks are lined up properly. So I can use a mirror here and I can see that's lined up perfectly. Right on the money. Maybe I can see it from down up here. Perfect. So now you can either raise the vehicle and pull the pin, or pull the pin from here. I'm gonna option to pull the pin from here. Because that way I can keep an eye on the tensioner, on the cam springs at the same time. Let's grab a pair of pliers, see if I can force this out a little bit easier. Well, that was a tough act. All right, I'm going to double check my alignment again, because you can never be too safe with this. You don't ever want to start that and have that be off a tooth. That's lined up. And that's lined up, perfect. Okay, I'm going to raise the vehicle, check the crank, make sure that's lined up. Then I can start installing the timing belts cover. So now I'm just taking my 10mm socket and I am snugging down on that bottom timing belt guide on the lower crank. Just snugging it. Now I've already checked my marks, everything's lined up perfect. Before I put the cover on, it is a natural process to, it's a 19mm socket, and you go clockwise. I'm going to turn this timing belt around 2 complete turns. I got a little less than a quarter, half a turn, almost a quarter turn left. We're going to line everything up. If it looks good, then we're putting the covers on. Got my bottom crank lined up. Let me check the 2 cam marks. Perfect. All right, ready to put the covers on. Okay, I'm going to install the mount bracket, leaving that one bolt in there, the one with that has the sunken inverted part. That's really hard to get to. I'm going to install the other top long bolt. Now that bottom bolt is one that had thread lock all over it. So we're going to clean this thread lock and apply some new stuff. I'm just going to start all these bolts, bring them in as far as I can by hand, because it's not an easy spot to get to. Now I took a wire brush to that lower bolt, so it goes through the water pump, and I cleaned off all the old thread lock on it, and I applied some new stuff. I'm going to bring that in, put that bolt right in. The torque on these 3 bolts with the 14mm socket head is 33 foot-pounds. So I can't get a head of a ratchet in there. So I'm going to give it my best and tighten it, not over tighten it. I can feel the difference. That is tight. Now I can install the lower timing cover. Line up all those mounting bolt holes. Probably put the center one in first. I bottom them out and then just turn it a little 1/8 of a turn because they have a sleeve on them. If you over tighten them, they'll break because they stop. As soon as you feel them stop, they're at the bolt shoulder. And this is the last one, and then I'll just take my 3/8 ratchet and make sure they're snug. So now I just have to break the crank bolt free again so I can put the harmonic balancer on. So I'm just gonna do a quick reverse. And if you notice, the crank didn't move at all because that was only on hand tight. So this is the step that I've seen people forget when I take them apart. Don't forget to put in that. It's a little spacer guide. I'm gonna take our harmonic balancer, line it up with that pin. And now we're going to install the crank bolt. I'm just going to install it by hand, and we'll look up the torque sequence. So the torque spec on the crank bolt is 47 foot-pounds. So they want me to torque that to 47 foot-pounds with the tool holding the crank pulley. So I've wedged that in there. Now that's 47 foot-pounds. Now we have to turn it an additional 60 degrees. Luckily, I have a torque wrench that does degrees. So 60 degrees, if you have to use a mark, would be, let's mark this at 12 o'clock. The bolt, now that it's torqued to 47 foot-pounds, is 12 o'clock. And 60 degrees is probably between right about here. Because that's 0. Over a quarter would be 90, and then straight down is 180. So we want between 0 and 90, and that would be 60. So it's about that size of a turn. So if you have to mark your bolt and you can do it visually, you can do it visually. So obviously don't mark the bolt in 2 places because it's going to turn. You would mark the housing on the back at 60. But I have a torque wrench with the degrees in it. So if I just want to redo this, so the bolt I lined up at noon, I marked it. Now, right about this area, I would mark this housing and turn that mark that I have at noon to that mark. But I'm going to be using this. Okay. Now I'm going to line the jack back up and lift my engine up. There we go. Now I'm going to reinstall the little 6mm bolt up on top here. That's a 10mm socket. Okay, so now we have the timing covers on the top for the cams. And a quick reference, if you place them down, you're like, oh. The back cover has got that plastic guide for the harness. So the right side cam, if you're looking at it from the front, it would be the left side cam, so closest to the firewall. That has the guide for that harness. Make sure you bring that harness out to the front like that. It's going to want to fall on the back. And you also have to make sure you get the cover down. There we go, inside this. See how it's got a lip on it? Make sure it goes down inside there. Okay, I'll grab my ratchet and tighten those down. Okay, now I can tuck that harness in. I don't want to forget while I'm back here, get it over with. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to move to the front cover. Pretty much the same basics. We want to make sure this guide is in on this housing. Don't forget that we loosened up, by we I say me, I loosened up the housing there, so make sure you tighten down that wiring harness right there. Okay, I'm going to install the power steering pump now before I put the mounting bolts back down. So this was a pain. You know what? I think if I lower the engine, I'll have more throw. Might as well put these in by hand now. Torque on these is 33 foot-pounds also. That's a 14mm. I torqued that to 33 foot-pounds. Now for the fun part, get the power steering back down in. Okay, we have two mounting bolts for the power steering pump. And then one under the pulley, almost in the center of it. It's not the easiest thing to get to. Both these bolts are 12mm socket. Power steering pump bolt, mounting bolts are 16 foot-pounds. Okay, now the bottom one. Going to install the new tensioner assembly. I'm going to guide it right up in there and put that bolt right in the threaded hole. I'm going to start it by hand. So I'm going to guide, you put the lower bolt in now. That holds the bottom part of that shock, hydraulic shock in place. The bolt for the mounting on this is 17mm socket. The torque specs for this tensioner bolt is 54 foot-pounds. And to tighten this lower one, it's a 12mm socket, and that is 16 foot-pounds. All right, so I'm going to install the belts from down below and finish it up on top. I'm going to guide the belt up through. Goes around the crank pulley first, then around the AC. Okay, when you install a new tensioner with a hydraulic shock, it's just like your shocks in your car. You need to, what they call, bleed them, and that's compress it 3 times. So the belt isn't on yet up on top. So I'm going to put my 19mm socket on that hex head, and I'm going to compress the shock slowly till I feel it bottom out. And then I'm going to let it retract. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to repeat this process for 3 times total. And if you don't do this, just like with shocks, you have take a great chance of the hydraulics having air in it. So you don't want your cert belt to fall off because the oils aren't compressed. And you don't want to, when you do a shock on your vehicle, you don't want it to bang and make rattling noise. So now we are all set there. Now I'm going to tighten up the drain plug on the radiator. Get a pair of pliers and just give that a little tweak. So I wrap the belt around the power steering, and it goes down around the pulley here, there. And I gotta raise it back up because it fell off the crank, and I'm gonna put it on down there with the tensioner. I'm gonna remount my coolant tank, overflow tank, right here. And I'm going to go down below and put the belt on. Okay, so now I'm going to put the undercover mud flap, guide these in. And get a bolt right here. Now we're clear to install our negative battery cable. And let's place that down on that battery post all the way to the bottom. 10mm socket. Snug that post up. Make sure it doesn't move. And we can put our engine cover on. These rubber bushings, they come off. So I like to install those first so that I can make sure it sits down flush. There we go. Guide the front ones up, the back will follow. Push down. Then you take a flathead screwdriver and tighten these down. Now we're ready to add our coolant. So I use a vacuum pump, which basically it hooks up your shop air to the system through this, and it pulls the vacuum on the coolant. So it will hopefully suck any air bubbles out, and then it really sucks the fluid back in with limited air bubbles. You'll watch the gauge go as high as it goes till it stops. So I can reuse the old coolant. I tested it, it's still good. And if there's any leaves or anything, particles, it won't pick it up because I have a screen. And I can just drop it right in there and then pull on the valve. And the vacuum from the engine, from me pulling it with the machine, sucks the coolant back down in. So now we're going to use the funnel to run the system, and that way if there is any air pockets, won't make a mess and it'll just burp right up through there while it's running. Now I'm going to install the right front tire. So now I'm going to torque the wheel to the manufacturer's specs. It's 94 foot-pounds in the star pattern. And give it one check. Now that the fluid's full, I'm ready to put the cover on. It's right up to the top of the neck. And then I'm going to fill the overflow. And because it's warm, this is high max. I'm going to bring it just a little bit below max. You know, the engine's been running for about 45 minutes. Just a little bit more. And now we're ready to put the cap on, clean the engine down, go for a road test.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.